This segment brought to you by Richard Carr, Buick GMC Cadillac, Richard Carr Motors, people you can count on. Colt Barber, one of the three guys that started the overall umbrella of what we do, Sikkim365.com, with a lot of news and the message boards and more, and even, of course, this show. Joins us on 365 Sports, Craig Smoke and Paul Catalina. Colt, thank you very much for your time. You've been covering Baylor for a long time. How would you describe what they've been on for the last 2, 3, or 4 weeks when it comes to recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, Smoke, like you said, I've been doing this for really 15 years in depth. I've followed Baylor football a lot longer than that. And you look at the guys that they're signing, and you guys are right in the middle of when Art Briles was there and some of the classes that he was bringing in. And I don't know that the stretch that they're on right now, and not just in terms of players with offers, but overall rankings. I mean, it's just been incredible. And then considering it's off of a 3-win season, I haven't seen it. It's unprecedented in a lot of ways. I mean, you expect a program like University of Texas, Alabama, or someone like that to have a down year, bounce back with a good recruiting class and just continue to build. But for a program like Baylor, I think it just shows the high-end potential that they have and they've always had. And you throw on NIL on top of that, and what GXG has done, and they're right in the thick of it. And now it's time to win on the field, because if they can win on the field this fall, you're building out something that is sustainable. And you start competing with the rest of the Big 12 and the teams that are in there, and Baylor will recruit on par with all of them if they continue this up.
Colt, they've gotten guys who didn't even have, who released infographics 2 weeks before, and they weren't even on there. Right, and they're coming in seemingly out of nowhere because of all that you mentioned. But how important is it for this coaching staff to stay in place so they can continue that momentum, and winning on the field, like you said, is the thing that makes that happen?
Well, at the end of the day, if you're not winning, recruits are probably not going to come. But what they're selling is a vision. They're selling a vision to the players on their team. They're selling a vision to the fans, and obviously now it's trickled into recruiting. And you get a guy like Taz Williams, who has just gone above and beyond to recruit. And believe it or not, he's the guy that you mentioned. Baylor was not even considered, and then at the last minute, he's picking Baylor. And you get this momentum going in college football, and sometimes it's just undeniable. And I don't know how that will translate to the year, but this coaching staff knows they have to win. But when you see it trickle into recruiting, more than likely that vision's selling to the guys that are on the team as well. And I don't say that lightly. I just you have to re-recruit the guys on your team and re-motivate them to do something. But if it's NIL, that's one piece of it, right, for recruiting. But you also have to sell a vision. And they're selling something there that I think they're selling to their team. And the wins have to come. I mean, if Dave Aranda doesn't go back to a bowl game this year, and that'll be the fourth time in 5 years that he hasn't done it. He did go to one in 22, but he had a losing season that year. But if they can't get back to a bowl game, I think that's where it ends. I had felt like they needed to do better than just getting to a bowl game, but this type of recruiting momentum, that is part of coaching college football. And if you have that success in coaching and recruiting, then that is part of your resume, and you're building something there. And for them to be able to do this is impressive. And I think the on-field results have to come. I just don't know if it was necessarily as high of a clip as it was 9 months ago that was needed.
Don't worry about it, Colt. Nobody remembers the Armed Forces Bowl from a couple of years ago, except for Air Force. They're the only ones that still think about the Armed Forces Bowl. But, yeah, you kind of forget that was also in that mix as well of bowl appearances. David K was a big move behind the scenes. They reshuffled some things in terms of the way that they did their NIL. You brought in a guy like Keenan Hall. It seems like it's really been a combination of things, but what do you think are kind of the one or two major factors that have really shifted this thing in such an extreme direction?
I had a recent conversation, and I was asking about recruiting, the NIL, and I thought it was really fascinating. It was Dave Aranda's willingness to recruit, and not like he wasn't willing to recruit previously, but it's almost like maybe when he became the defensive coordinator again, that light switch flipped a little bit, and he said, "Man, I can get back to recruiting," or whatever it was. And his phone calls are more regular. He's more involved in recruitment now than he was previously. So I think, one, the head coach being able to re-involve himself and stuff is massive. But I think in general, you have a coaching staff that was kind of caged up because the approach that Coach Aranda was going to have. And I say that I know there's a lot of fresh faces. I knew there's offensive scheme that's changed. But in general, I think you're kind of seeing what was the potential was. But Coach Aranda's mentality, in a lot of ways, might have been holding them back. And now you see Dallas Baker. I mean, he's all over social media. He's very vocal. He has been that in the past, just in different ways. You see the recruiting staff, they're becoming more vocal. And I think that's the reins loosening a little bit, and Dave Aranda's approach for the program changing a little bit. And they're kind of getting some swagger. I mean, there's coming, little shots going back and forth across the interwebs that we haven't ever seen. And that's good because I think for a program like Baylor, they need that additional motivation, that extra swag that they kind of thrived on when they first started this stretch of the best history of college football for Baylor University. They had that. And I think they have to refine that. They have to rekindle that swagger. And I think it starts with Dave Aranda. His personality not necessarily has changed. I think he's just going in a different direction, and he's going to see if it works. And right now, you talk about winning the offseason, every move that he's made seems like it has worked. There's some that have got overturned. You talk about offensive line coaches coming and going. But in general, overall, they have won this offseason. But like we said, we got to get back to the winning on the field now. I think they set themselves up in position because you talk about recruiting. It started back in December with the transfer portal. They added a lot of guys that are going to help them win this year.
Yeah, I think that when you mention the swagger, I just think that in the last 5 to 6, 7 years, depending on the coaching staff, the year of Grobe, which was like a year of just like everybody was sitting on their hands and just trying to get through each day. And then what Rule brought to the table, which is a different angle, and then, of course, Aranda. But I kind of got the impression from coaches saying that we are no longer going to just get bullied on social media. We're not going to get bullied by people saying or taking pot shots at us. We're going to have the ability to fire back. They're going to lose some recruiting battles. They're going to lose probably more than they win. But I kind of got that impression, so it's interesting you brought that up because I think they're full throttle into that.
Yeah, it does. And, you want your, as a coach, I have no doubt that you want your team to handle themselves with class. There's that fine line of having edge and having class. But I think Baylor needs to be kind of on the opposite side of that edge. They don't need to toe up to it. They need to toe over it a little bit and find that because last year they had a young team. I mean, there's a lot of youth, and I think a lot of people say, well, when you get older, you get a little bit more edgy. I think we all kind of understand what that means. But you also have to cultivate that type of atmosphere and say, we're going to do this. And there's no doubt that the players are watching on social media. They're all over social media as it is, but they're seeing that. Some of the guys that they added in the transfer portal bring that. You talk about Snacks Johnson 2 years ago before he went to Arkansas. He was kind of that. And then they lose it. They lose guys like that, and they haven't added it back. But now they're back in the program. You're not talking about bad kids. It's just that's how they play. They play with that swagger. And I think it all kind of correlates. I think it goes back to Coach Aranda saying, okay, this did not work how I wanted to do it. Now we're willing to do it. Let's try this different way. And it has really taken its own life in the last 9 months.
Colt, when you said guys that are going to help them this year that they've gotten, guys from the portal, they've had to go in because some of the guys they got from the portal are out for the season or medically retired. How do you think that affects them going forward when it actually comes to getting 6 or 7 wins this year, at least to rebound from the last year and a half that's been abysmal?
Yeah, I mean, with such a large portal class, you expect there to be some misses. You take chances on guys. Like you talk about Michael Trigg from Ole Miss, who has just had a roller coaster of a career. But anybody that knows college football recruiting, for one, but also just in general, how good of an athlete and the potential that he brings. And so, like, you have guys that you're saying, yeah, we're probably not going to hit on all of these, but if we take 4 of them and we hit on one of these guys that kind of bring this different mentality, then you're kind of cooking with grease there. I mean, it's going to take off. And a kid like that, or Steve Linton from Tech, who was at Syracuse before, just a natural pass rusher 2 years ago, last offseason, neither one of those guys are considered. I mean, Snacks Johnson is a great example, and they've had some guys retire. Kirk Deniker was obviously a tough one. They really were high on him. The good news is that even before we knew it, I think good news. Obviously, that's is not good news, but the staff knew in advance that was probably coming, so they had time to prepare for it. Coach Miller on the offensive line brought in 3 more guys in the summer to kind of offset that. And the approach is so much different. And you start talking about junior college guys, like they really went to the opposite end of the spectrum, and now they just have to balance that out. Because if you rely on it too much, when we saw that with TCU last year, I mean, their whole mindset was let's just rebuild it from the top down and not from the bottom up. And I think what Baylor has right now is that they have built a foundation of culture. They have a young group that's really strong. I mean, if you really look back at what that freshman class did, the redshirt freshman class last year, there's a lot of potential there. Now they're adding some different layers on top of it that are the upperclassmen. And obviously that starts with potentially DeQuan Finn and what he brings to the table, the transfer receivers to kind of gel with that offense. But in this day and age, it doesn't take a lot to say, hey, we changed our offense. There's not this, patiently waiting for this offense to take hold anymore. I mean, you go to the portal and you're ready to go. Same can be said for defense, but fortunately Baylor's not changing too much schematically on defense. I mean, there will be changes, but I don't think Baylor fans should have to wait in this day and age with everything that you have access to in terms of the portal, finding quarterbacks. You can go buy a quarterback essentially, and what Baylor did was DeQuan Finn to come in and run an offense that he's already familiar with to an extent. So transfer portal is great. I just think they have to find a way to balance it. And we'll see how it takes hold this fall.
All right, so you brought this up, and I brought this up yesterday on the show that Colt, you, Craig, Grayson, and also Travis did what would you define, what was it, Craig, define as
a successful
season? And I think a couple mentioned a bowl game, and then, Craig, you mentioned, can we have fun?
Well, does it look like a team that's enjoyable to watch?
And then Travis brought up, you'll know when you see it. And I kind of liked all of them. Colt, do you think it's possible with this recruiting surge that if Dave Aranda goes 5-7, but it's all the way to the end, that there's a chance he would stay on for another year to keep that class together, or can you do that?
If you truly believe that Dave Aranda is a good football coach that can develop assistant coaching staffs, and the real struggle was top-end talent to make you competitive, then yes. If that's truly what you believe, because what is he doing right now? He's addressing a talent issue. If that's your perspective, he's upgrading the talent. So you go 5-7 and you have 5 of those are, one score losses, and you lost your quarterback at some point in there. Like, I think you take that into consideration. Now, take back 9 months ago, Baylor never starts recruiting any better than they had in the last couple of classes in general, then I don't think you have that same perspective because the talent's not upgrading, right? But at 5-7, you're recruiting a top 25 class potentially. You have 4-stars coming out your ears comparatively to the last 10 years. Like, your mindset changes. It has to, because that's obviously a key part of college football. I mean, if you're not recruiting, you're not competing with the big boys. And I know the Big 12 has changed, but even within their own conference, you better be at the top, because that's what's going to drive your championships and your success. So I think there's a pathway to saying, 5-7 Dave Aranda can be retained. I personally don't think that happens, just because I don't see you going 5-7 without there being some ugly losses and some spiraling out of control depending on how the season goes. So I think there's a pathway. I don't think it's realistic. But I'm with Craig, man. I think for a team to have fun, they're probably going to have some success on the field. Last year, there was not a lot of that, so it wasn't very fun. So I think they correlate so much. And I think if this team can find that a little bit of momentum, a little bit of swagger that they can play with early in the season, who knows where it goes. I mean, they have the talent. I truly believe that this team has the talent, especially on offense, to take off and just kind of turn the tables from a year ago where the offense just was in mud the entire season. the defense probably never really got in the groove and felt like they wanted to be in a game because of the way the offense kind of, chugged along very slowly and methodically. And just, to be frank, didn't do enough to help the defense have any confidence. So I'm anxious to see it. I mean, we're here. The fall camp practice starts tomorrow, and we don't have a ton of access, but I think we're going to get glimpses of it and hear from the players about what the changes have been over the summer. And I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, one way or the other, something's going to happen this fall, I believe.
All right, last thing, and this is a merchandise thing. Colt, we're going to have slowly but surely here, like sooner rather than later, the in-store merchandise for new hats and stuff available?
Yeah, so right now, all the 365 Sports, we have 3 or 4 versions of the hat available right now. You can hop on and buy those. They're $19. We'll add more and more, just kind of different, colors to match possibly your school. And some generic whites and grays and stuff. But yeah, we're adding them in there. If you feel like supporting, it would be a great way. The brand's kind of taking off on us. We just want to capitalize on it. If you're a big follower of the show, we appreciate the support. But the hats, and there's some T-shirts available on there that you can hop on and order. Reasonable price. Like, we're not trying to make a bunch of money off of it. We just want to kind of grow the brand. And it's on 365sportsradio.com, and you can hop on there and buy one, and it'll be out pretty quickly. Once you do.
And
I will put a link in the...
Yeah, do that to the chat room, Paul. Thank you. We'll also have some that will be given away. Stay tuned for that. I know Kim Coulter is going to buy a chunk. He loves the all-white, and you and Kim and I went back and forth on that earlier today. Thanks for your time, Colt. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. I'll have a good one.
Colt Barber, Sikkim365.com, and also 365 Sports. 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock.